The mind is a strange machine, capable of turning the most ordinary Tuesday into a landscape of suffocating glass. Sylvia Plath knew this territory well, mapping its contours with the precision of a cartographer and the heart of a poet. I took a deep breath and listened to the old brag of my heart. I am, I am, I am. In these words lives the entire architecture of survival. February 1963. London shivers under winter's grip while Sylvia Plath sits at her kitchen table. Children sleeping upstairs, marriage dissolved like sugar in bitter tea. Her fingers move across the typewriter keys with desperate urgency, each strike a heartbeat, each word a lifeline thrown into the darkness that threatens to swallow her whole. The bell jar descends without warning, that invisible dome of suffocation that transforms familiar rooms into alien landscapes. Plath captures this descent, not as metaphor but as lived reality, where oxygen becomes precious and the simplest tasks, brushing teeth, choosing clothes, become monumental feats of endurance and will. Esther Greenwood emerges from Plath's consciousness like a shadow-gaining substance, carrying the weight of every young woman who has ever felt the ground shift beneath her feet. She is 19, brilliant, and slowly drowning in a world that promises everything while delivering a peculiar kind of nothing. The summer of 1953 pulses through the narrative like a fever dream. New York City spreads before Esther like a glittering invitation, yet she cannot taste its sweetness. The city becomes a mirror reflecting her internal desolation, its bright lights casting shadows that speak of isolation and disconnection. Plath understood that depression is not sadness amplified, but a fundamental alteration of reality's texture. Colours drain from the world, food loses its flavour, and the future contracts into an impossible tunnel. She writes this transformation with the precision of a scientist documenting a new form of weather. The 50s wrap around women like elegant restraints, offering marriage and motherhood as the only acceptable destinations. Esther stares at these paths with the horror of someone watching her own burial. Plath captures the suffocation of limited choices, the way society's expectations can become a form of slow strangulation. Beneath the surface of conventional feminine success lies a screaming void. Plath excavates this space with unflinching honesty, revealing how the pressure to be perfect, grateful, and perpetually cheerful can fracture a soul along invisible fault lines that no one else can see. The psychiatric hospital becomes a strange theatre where sanity and madness perform their daily dance. Plath strips away romantic notions of mental illness, presenting instead a clinical world where healing happens in increments, where progress is measured in small victories over the mind's rebellion against itself. Electroshock therapy arrives like lightning in the narrative, that brutal marriage of medicine and electricity that promise to reset broken minds. Plath describes it not as cure, but as another form of violence, where the body becomes a battlefield between healing and harm. Dr. Nolan emerges as a different kind of healer, one who listens without judgment, who sees the person beneath the symptoms. Through this relationship, Plath explores the delicate dance between patient and therapist, where trust must be rebuilt from the ruins of a shattered self. The mirror becomes a recurring character in Plath's universe, reflecting not just physical appearance but the fractured nature of identity itself. Esther stares into glass surfaces seeking recognition, finding instead a stranger wearing her face, living her life without her permission. Plath's own biography bleeds through every page like watercolours in rain. Born in 1932, she carries the weight of her father's early death, the pressure of academic excellence, and the impossible task of being both brilliant and feminine in a world that insists these qualities are mutually exclusive. The bathtub scene crystallizes the relationship between body and mind, where the physical act of bathing becomes a meditation on existence itself. Plath transforms this intimate moment into a profound exploration of how we inhabit our own skin, how we can feel foreign in our own flesh. Marriage appears in the novel not as salvation, but as another form of cage, beautifully decorated but confining nonetheless. Plath understood that love itself cannot cure what ails the human heart, that another person's devotion cannot fill the void that exists within the self. The baby imagery throughout the novel carries the weight of expectation and terror. Motherhood, presented as every woman's destiny, becomes in Plath's hands a complex negotiation between creation and destruction, between giving life and preserving one's own existence. Cambridge University shapes the backdrop of Plath's own intellectual awakening, where she discovers both the power and the burden of exceptional intelligence. The academic world becomes a stage where brilliance is expected, where failure is not just personal, but a betrayal of potential itself. Ted Hughes enters Plath's story like a force of nature, bringing both creative inspiration and emotional chaos. Their relationship becomes a study in how two brilliant minds can create both extraordinary art and extraordinary pain, how love can be both muse and destroyer. The act of writing becomes Plath's form of breathing, each poem a small victory over the silence that threatens to claim her. She approaches her craft with the intensity of someone who understands that words are not just communication, but survival itself. The bell jar's transparency creates its own particular torment, the ability to see the world continuing around you while being unable to participate in its rhythms. Plath captures this isolation with devastating precision, showing how depression creates a barrier that is both invisible and impenetrable. Food becomes a language in Plath's universe, where the ability to taste represents connection to life itself. When Esther cannot eat, she cannot live. When appetite returns, it signals the slow journey back to the world of the living. The summer job at the magazine transforms into a surreal performance, where Esther plays the role of the successful young woman while her interior world crumbles. Plath exposes the exhausting theatre of normalcy, where keeping up appearances becomes a full-time occupation. Sleep eludes Esther like a lover who has lost interest, leaving her suspended in a twilight state where day and night blur into one endless grey expanse. Plath understands that insomnia is not just sleeplessness, but a form of exile from the natural rhythms of existence. The other patients in the hospital become a chorus of broken voices, each carrying their own version of the bell jar's weight. Through these encounters, Plath explores how madness wears different faces, how each person's breakdown is both unique and universal. Recovery arrives not as a dramatic moment, but as a gradual shift in the quality of light, the return of small pleasures, the ability to imagine a future that extends beyond the current moment. Plath charts this territory with the same precision she brought to The Descent. The novel's publication in 1963 coincides with Plath's own death, creating a haunting symmetry between art and life. The book becomes both her literary achievement and her final statement, a last gift to a world that struggled to understand her complexity. The women's movement finds in Plath's work a prophetic voice, someone who articulated the suffocation of limited choices decades before these limitations became part of public discourse. Her words become a rallying cry for those who refuse to accept society's narrow definitions of feminine success. Contemporary readers discover in Esther's story their own struggles with anxiety, depression, and the pressure to perform perfection. Plath's honesty about mental illness helps crack open conversations that had been sealed shut by shame and stigma. The medical establishment's portrayal in the novel becomes the indictment of how society treats its most vulnerable members. Plath exposes the ways in which healing can become another form of violence, where cure is valued over compassion. The symbolism of the fig tree resonates across generations, that perfect metaphor for how choice can become paralysis, how the abundance of options can lead to a kind of starvation. Each fig represents a life not lived, a path not taken. Plath's poetic sensibility infuses every sentence with layered meaning, where simple objects, roses, mirrors, telephones, become loaded with significance. She proves that prose can carry the concentrated power of poetry, that narrative can be both story and song. The novel's ending refuses easy resolution, acknowledging that recovery is not a destination but a daily practice. Plath understood that the bell jar could descend again, that mental health is not a problem to be solved but a condition to be managed. Academic institutions now teach Plath's work as both literature and social document, recognizing her dual achievement as artist and cultural critic. Her words become required, reading for understanding both the craft of writing and the experience of being human. The stigma surrounding mental illness begins to crack under the pressure of Plath's honesty. Her willingness to name the darkness gives others permission to speak their own truths, creating a lineage of openness that continues to this day. Publishers initially struggled with the novel's unflinching portrayal of depression, uncertain whether readers would embrace such darkness. Plath's triumph lies in proving that difficult truths can find their audience, that honesty has its own form of beauty. The international success of the novel proves that the experience of mental illness transcends cultural boundaries, that Plath's particular American story speaks to universal human experiences. Her words cross oceans and languages, carrying their power intact. Biographical scholars continue to debate the relationship between Plath's life and her art, but the novel stands independent of these discussions. It succeeds not because it mirrors her experience, but because it creates its own truth, its own reality. The bell jar becomes a metaphor that enters common language, a shorthand for the experience of depression that helps others articulate their own struggles. Plath's image achieves the rare feat of becoming both literary device and cultural touchstone. Contemporary mental health professionals recognize in Plath's work a nuanced understanding of depression that predates much of the clinical language used today. Her insights into the nature of mental illness prove that artists can be diagnosticians of the human condition. The novel endures because it refuses to offer false comfort, instead providing the more valuable gift of recognition. Plath's achievement lies not in solving the riddle of human suffering, but in articulating it with such precision that readers feel less alone in their own darkness. In the end, she gives us not hope, but something more precious, the knowledge that we are not alone in our bell jars, that others have breathed this same impossible air and lived to tell the story.